Ding Liren is a seriously class act. Sitting at number 3 in the world, he doesn't always get the headlines in the same way that Carlsen does or Firouzja, but he reminded us all yesterday just what a tour de force he can be when he turns it on. So he was playing in day 1 of the Airthings Masters. It's an online event that's just started, rapid play games, 16 players, lots of headline players like Carlsen, Ding, Aronian. And once they get through this round robin stage, they'll then go to knockouts, so quarters, semis, finals. And it's the first leg of the Champions Chess Tour 2022. So in this game here that I want to show now, Ding Liren was playing with black. He was playing against young Pragg, 16-year-old chess prodigy from India. Let's see what happened here. And if you love a daily chess video, hit that subscribe button, never miss an upload. So okay, we had this e4 on the board. We see lots of this Italian game stuff at the highest level, bishop to c4. We had knight f6, pawn d3, and bishop to c5. You can go bishop to e7 there. That's what Carlsen played against Esipenko and he got absolutely destroyed. It was a horrible opening for Carlsen, on yesterday as well I should say. So we had pawn c3 now from Pragg, now pawn to d6. And although you've got this bishop outside the pawn chain now, white doesn't usually play bishop to g5 here, which is what Pragg played. And we'll see why in this game. Don't mess with Ding. So now pawn h6 comes, it kicks that bishop, it drops back to h4, now a5 was thrown in. This is really typical in these structures, it gives that bishop some retreat room. We had knight b to d2 developing, bishop to a7, castles from white, and now black goes pawn to g5. You can actually push g5 even if you've castled there. But anyway, the bishop dropped back now. You can't take here, this sacrifice just isn't working. It's the kind of thing you might see in blitz, but there's no knight on c3 coming to d5 to intensify pressure. So say you go rook g8 here as black, you can retreat or you can defend that bishop, but rook g6 holds the knight and you'll soon get the queen out of the pin like this, or coming to h8. You just don't have enough moves as white to intensify the pressure. So the players understand this. Instead of taking that pawn, Pragg just drops the bishop back after g5. We had castles from Ding now. Pawn to a3 from Pragg. He gives the bishop a bit of room here or here. And he's also maybe preparing b4 in some lines. And now this is where Ding shows great understanding of the position. He plays knight to h7. Preparing to push his kingside pawns. Is one of the few positions where you can justifiably push those pawns in front of the king because you've got these minor pieces to target and an initiative building on that side of the board. So pawn to h3 was played. There was a threat to actually go h5, h4, trapping this bishop here. Now h5 came anyway, and here Pragg has to try and find some counterplay against this pawn storm. So he could play pawn b4 here. Instead he played pawn d4, striking in the centre to meet the flank attack. Very thematic, but in this position the d4 pawn actually becomes a bit of a weakness, because after pawn to g4, captures and recaptures there, we can see that this knight is a bit loose and then d4 will be weak. Now we don't have knight to h4 here played, because then the queen can come to g5. There was a threat to actually jump that knight into g6 here, using this pinned pawn by the bishop, but queen g5 covers that, and now white's in some trouble. Say you capture here, the knight could recapture, black's pieces are flooding into the position, and this knight on the rim looks very dim, can't get properly into the game, white's in some trouble here. So coming back here, instead Pragg threw in this bishop h4 move, hitting the queen. But it simply slid up the board to d7, overprotecting g4, so that after this knight moved away, now you can take on d4 here. And best here would have been actually recapturing. Although you're giving Ding a pawn, say he takes like this, at least you can start to get your pieces a bit more back into the game. Say you go bishop e2 here immediately, preparing to pick up this pawn. But as it was in the game, Pragg actually sacked that pawn. He played bishop e2 immediately, going for some direct counterplay, But now Ding just keeps eating the pawns here, as we'll see. So he plays takes on c3, and you're not actually in time to take this pawn on g4 with the bishop, because then f5 is a really nice response. You're threatening to take the knight at the end of the lines. That's the problem here. So say you recaptured with the pawn, for example, well, now you can just take this knight on d2, and there's just not enough counterplay with this f6 move. Although you kick the queen, it can come here. Say you go bishop h5, well, it finds a square here. There's just not enough play for the piece. So we didn't have this line. We didn't have the bishop taking on g4. Instead, knight c4 was played. Again, best here would have actually just been taking that pawn. But knight c4, Pragg continues this strategy of direct counterplay. And this is some kind of Danish gambit gone seriously wrong here now, because Ding just eats another pawn on b2. You can't scare the world number 3 with this sort of stuff. He'll call you out on it. So the rook is now attacked. That one moves across. Again, probably best was just taking that pawn with the knight, but Pragg's all in now on this attack. So the knight came to e5 now from Ding. Not necessarily the best. He could have actually looked at queen e6 there, pressuring this one. But okay, knight e5 is still good, keeps advantage. And now Pragg really should have taken this one off the board because it's holding g4. It's also looking to come back to g6. And we could have had a line like this. The rook could take on b2. I guess Pragg didn't want the queens to come off the board. Maybe that's why he didn't go for this kind of thing. But it would have been his best try. As it was, he tried to keep mixing the position up. So instead of playing knight e5, he took the pawn on b2. But this allows Ding to go knight to g6. So hitting this unprotected bishop, picking up a valuable tempo, because after the bishop retreated here, then we had knight f6, so that one starts coming back into the game. And white's pieces are all over the place now. You can't actually recapture this pawn immediately. So knight e3 was played, preparing to recapture the pawn, but now black can simply pick up on e4. The whole position is crumbling. So we had captures on g4 here with the h-knight, and now pawn to f5 came, an important move because this f6 square was sensitive. There was a fork threatened there if this knight ever moved. And Pragg just can't meet all of these threats now, as we can see. So this knight is attacked, but there's also a threat to go pawn to f4 here, hitting both of these pieces. So a desperate check was thrown in on d5. The king came up to g7, and now the bishop dropped back, leaving this one on prise, but f4 was coming anyway. So first Ding chucked in this knight to c3 move. The queen moved away, there was a capture here with check, and after the recapture of that piece, then Ding took on g4. We had knight to d5, hopping that final piece into the attack, but it's all just too little too late for Pragg. So queen to c6 came, Ding's happy to get the queens off. That one dropped back to b3, we had bishop f5 now, knight to e7 fought those pieces, but after queen d7 just dropping back, rook f to e1 held the knight, but now a simple finish by Ding. There are many ways to win the position, but he played a nice one. Bishop takes on f2, forking the rook, so that has to be captured, and now you simply pick up the knight here. So here Pragg actually resigned because he's overwhelming material down. So don't mess with the world number 3. He showed us why in this game, he showed us why in the tournament. If you want to see another amazing Ding Liren game, click here. Thanks for watching and see you soon.